I actually don't know if any of that stuff I just did was recording, so I'm just gonna pick up from here, and if I need to, I'll do a narration later. Well, here's that narration I mentioned. Sure enough, my GoPro cut out, and I lost about the first 5 to 10 minutes of footage from working with Loki today. Fortunately, I was just standing around. I took the lead rope off of him, and we hung out for a little bit, and then I explained a couple of the things I'd be doing today. I just want to go over one of them because after the camera went out, I explained the rest of them in the videos later on. And that one thing is that Loki had his shoes pulled last week. When he came to us, he had shoes on all 4 feet, and they were too small for his feet, so he was already a little tender-footed, and his feet were really long. So he has had those shoes come off, and his feet now are very tender. It's just like if you wear shoes for a long time and then you try and walk around the yard and there's rocks in your yard, you're going to feel every single one of those rocks. So right now Loki is very Princess and the Pea. Every single thing in the arena, he feels it with the bottoms of his feet. And with the shoes gone, his feet will begin to harden up on their own pretty quickly. But it is a process. It's not something that happens in one day. And they do have to essentially build calluses on the bottoms of his feet. So I pay attention to this, and I'm listening to Loki. And you'll see this in the video as it goes on. There is a point where he hits a rock pretty hard, and it's important to know why he's so sensitive to those rocks when you see that video clip. As for everything else that I've gone over, you should be pretty good to watch the rest of this video and see how training for day 2 in the round pen, this is day 3 of work with Loki, went. Yesterday we just did groundwork and work on ground tying in the barn. He was kind of sore in the muscles and his feet were still pretty tender. So I think he might be getting every other day off, or at least every day with a walking workout as a big component of it. He's going to need that no matter what for his fitness anyway. So go ahead and enjoy the rest of the video for today. And I'm going to talk you through a lot of the stuff I'm doing while I'm doing it in the round pen. Yes, look at that. Good boy, Loki. That was excellent. I barely had to step around at all. All right, so that's 3 times he's broken out of the trot. On the 3rd time, I'm gonna get a little more aggressive. This next time, I'm just gonna point and go after him with the whip. Actually, he did a whole lap. Get some more foam? Okay. So see how I took that step back, but not like just walking backwards? That's my cue for my horses to slow down a gait. Good. See how he hesitated for a second? He didn't turn his head towards me, but he did hesitate, so he was asking another question. He was saying, do I stop here? And when I pointed, he picked up his walk speed again. So that's another good sign that he's asking questions, but also willing to respond to the answers. That was not a question, that was a statement. He's like, I'm gonna stop here. set up to do a proper turn. So right then I got a phone call. Went to go turn that off. I don't really care that I just walked away from him, because sometimes people are going to do things that are not perfect, that don't make sense, that aren't in line with what we're doing. If I can be consistent 90% of the time, then the horses will be successful, at least in training. And I would like to get to where I can be consistent, less and less, basically more and more imperfect, much like a beginner rider would be. Because if I can be consistent 50% of the time and the horse still knows what it's doing, well then I guess I have a bomb-proof horse for some kid to ride, or an adult amateur that just, doesn't really know a lot but likes to ride. So that's kind of how I assess what level a horse is for its rider. The more the horse requires me to be consistent, the more that horse is going to need an advanced rider who can also be consistent. The more forgiving that horse is of me doing random things like just walking away in the middle of a session and then stopping and standing like this, the better that horse is going to be at going to live with an amateur rider or someone who doesn't have as much training. So that's a good sign. It's a good way to test them. I play with that more and more the longer horses are in training, because for the most part, I wouldn't have a client if they didn't have some questions for me, which means they're also going to have questions for their horse, and that horse needs to be prepared for an owner that asks them questions. Yep. Good. You notice the grass in this round? So I don't know if you saw it on camera, but about a lap ago, he took a stumbling step and then limped pretty good for about a quarter of the arena. So I think he probably found a rock and stepped on it. I think it was that back leg. So it's like if you're walking across the floor and you step on a Lego, it's gonna be painful for a little bit. Oh, that was a good turnaround. But he's moving better now. It's not staying consistently lame. So I'm going to keep him at a walk for a little bit, and we might do a lot less trotting today. Oh, I think I see the rock he stepped on too. That's a big one. There, that's better. So he's moving better. Okay, good. So it's always good to know how to pay attention to that stuff. When a horse is limping, they bob their head up and down pretty aggressively. If you're curious what that looks like, there's a lot of videos on YouTube. It's called Examining Lameness in Horses. Right now I'm just kind of evaluating his gait. I think part of this is, you know, we had a big session on Tuesday, and he's probably a little sore in the muscles from that. On top of, he has no shoes anymore. He's going barefoot. He's learning how to be barefoot. He steps on rocks occasionally. There's a good stop, but he kind of turned away from me just a hair. I'm not accepting that anymore. Don't do it. Don't do it, Loki. There you go. Do I care that I had to get super close to him? No, because I found a way to make him give me the right answer. And right now, in fact, always, it's about finding ways to make your horse a winner, not finding ways to put your horse in a situation where he makes a mistake. That's that duality of being a horse trainer. I won't accept that forever, where I have to get that close to him in order to turn him around. But considering he's not really grasping the concept just yet, I'm gonna allow it. But if it got to the point where he used that as a crutch, where he expected me to step right in front of him every time and direct him from there, then I'd get a little more aggressive with my cues and maybe start swinging the whip a little earlier. Let him make a mistake a few times and then go back and fix it. Let him make a mistake a few times, go back and fix it. But for about every 3 to 5 corrections I give, where I say that's not what I wanted, I need to go back and find a way to make a winner out of the horse and give him something he does well. Even at the beginning stages when they're learning. So what would that look like here? If he always turns away from me and we get to like that number 5 time he's turned away from me and I've corrected him and he doesn't fix it. So this is number 2. We'll see if we get there. I kind of have that log in my mind at all times. So he's expecting to be turned around right here. I'm going to do it on this side this time. Prepared to turn him around. Makes a mistake. So that's number 3 mistake. So if he doesn't get this turnaround where he turns and faces me to change direction in the next 2 turns, then I'm going to do something else to find a way to reward him for something so he knows I'm still listening. He's turning towards me. This one looks promising. There it is. Perfect. And I'm not going to ask him to trot right now. He's going to get a walk. And as he goes around, we'll see if he licks and chews. I'm going to let him probably do like a good lap of a walk, just like this. So let's say that he did not get that turnaround. And we got to the point where he's just been getting corrected. What would I have done? I would have gotten to a point where I could just back up and stop and reward him for standing still when I backed up. Because if you have a horse in a round pen, no matter how much they're not listening to you, even if you have a totally wild one like Zendaya the Mustang, if I back up far enough so that I occupy the entire half of this pen, they're just going to stop coming around and they will come to a standstill. That's why I like to start them in the round pen, because right here you can always find a place to get them to stop, and then you can both relax for a second and show them, or like this. That's the answer. There's that lick and chew. And if you haven't seen my earlier videos, when a horse licks and chews, it's one of the signs that they have released some tension from their body. They cannot process new information if they are too tense. So it's like a level that's always going up. I like to think of it like they have 3 zones. They have like a green zone, which is the learning zone. They can hold a little bit of tension in that zone, and anywhere below that green zone, they're totally fine for learning. They might have a little bit of tension, but they're still good to go. The yellow zone is next, just like a yellow light. That's like your warning zone. That's the place that when you get to the yellow zone, it's pretty big. You have room for different amounts of tension, but you want to find ways to release it. So Loki's licking and chewing right now, so that yellow zone is dropping back down into green, so he's back in the learning zone. In the yellow zone, they're not actively processing information. So learning takes place after the fact. So they won't really learn much in that yellow area. They'll hold on to the information, but they're not really, they're too tense at that point to think about it. So you want to stop and let them lick and chew. And as they go back into that green zone, releasing tension, when they're in the learning zone, they also process the information. And then the next time you send them around again, because you've given them the chance to release that tension and think about the new information, all of a sudden it's like a magical different horse. They know that information. The third zone is your red zone. That is your fear zone. That is your flight zone. That is where you don't want to be, because if you get there, absolutely no learning can occur and the horse isn't even trying to remember what it was learning a moment ago. It's just trying to get away from you in some way. Some horses will be running around, bucking, freaking out, but the worst kind are the horses that just freeze and stand totally still. But their head's up high and their eyes are wide and their mind is totally shut down. And at any point, if they think they can get away, all they're thinking about is, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave. They're not thinking about you and what's going on around them. If they're thinking about getting away, and at any point they think they can, even if it means running you over to jump out of the stall door, they're going to do it. So you want to stay out of the red zone. I try and train my horses into the yellow zone and then back down. Into the yellow zone and back down. And that yellow zone you can almost kind of think is like right outside your comfort zone. Every time we go into it, we expand the comfort zone a little bit and that green zone stretches. So that is part of the training process. So if I say, they've crossed their fear threshold, the horse is beyond its fear threshold, what I mean is that horse has crossed into that red zone, and at this point, he's too afraid to do any training. As you can see, I was saying it before, the grass in the arena is kind of yellow. We sprayed some weed repellent stuff in here, and it's killing all the grass. It's been 2 days, so it's not dangerous for horses, but I still don't want him to eat it just because it's dead grass. And then the arena's going to turn to dirt and grass won't grow here again. Good boy, Loki. Do you see how he's hanging his head much lower? He looks a lot more like that classic quarter horse, that trail horse, as he goes around. If he can keep that low head set while speeding up his gait, that would require him to use his back a little bit more. So that was a little better. That's nice. Very nice, Loki. This is the fitness walk. This is the walk that we want, like on the lower end of it, but it's a good little marching walk. And this is the walk that's going to get him to gain physical fitness. So we want him to get really comfortable at that walk. So I'm testing him, walking away. Oh, he turned towards me. See how the direction of my body was different that time? So he didn't really know what to think of that. So if you're going to try this with your horses at home, the angle of your body matters. So there, he turned his butt towards me. Ooh. So he kicked out at me for a second there. If I had been paying closer attention, I would have kept on whipping, not him, but the ground. until he was moving in a straight line. That way I didn't, you know, stop in the middle of him bucking. Let's see if he does it again. There. Arm's getting tired. So see how he kicked up his feet that time? So I was aware of it. I kept going until he was going along the circle. Where the pressure stops is where the horse learns what the right thing to do is. Good. Point. Don't do it. There. So even though he turned around, I kept going with the whip that time as well because his butt was up in the air. And he's just doing that because he's out of shape and he's like, you're making me work and it's hard. That's 3. Yes, good boy. That was a hard one. I did not expect him to get that. He was angled away from me, and he decided to turn towards me anyway. Good boy, Loki. I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. Yes. And give him a chance to think about that. I want to see a lick and chew before I move on. Good. So he's in that yellow zone right now and he's thinking. He's like a little uncomfortable, but I think he's like right at the bit of that yellow zone. He's not crazy uncomfortable. A lot of times right before a horse licks and chews, because it's kind of like they're showing themselves, they kind of twitch a little bit or turn their head away. It's almost like it's a very revealing thing for them and they're embarrassed by it. So he's kind of embarrassed to be showing me that he was a little vulnerable. He was nervous. So he's like shifting his weight, he's turning his head away, but you see that lick and chew. So once I stop and commit to a lick and chew, I don't want to correct for every little thing. I don't want to correct for them shifting their feet. If I have committed to waiting, they're allowed to shift their feet a little bit. Is he allowed to turn away from me and walk off? No. But if he's like, you know, just dancing around a little, that's actually part of it. They'll do that from time to time just because they're a little bit nervous about showing me how they're feeling. Good boy. Good boy, Loki. So he's had a few of them. All right. And he's looking at me, so I'm going to point. Don't do it. Up. A little bit of a better walk. So I'm not whipping the ground with my whip when I ask for that better walk. I'm just kind of wiggling it. I don't want to kiss because that means go up a gait. So go from a walk to a trot. I want him to just walk faster. We'll stop here. Good. 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 I'm going to try again. Yeah, look at that. What a good boy. we had barely crossed that threshold into that yellow zone, so I think he's probably going to lick and chew as he walks around the arena. Sometimes if they're not too far into that yellow zone, they can release the tension while moving. Sometimes if they're really far in that yellow zone, they need to come to a complete stop to think. You may be able to hear it on camera, but his neck and his back pop every time he drops his head, even if it's just for grazing. So that's another sign. I mean, if your joints pop all the time, your back pops all the time, every time you bend over, you might, you know, benefit from some relaxation. He's pooping, so I'm not going to push him to go faster. He really likes that spot right there. There's a rock right there, so that's why he stumbled. That's a better walk. See how he's turning his head away? He's thinking about that lick and chew. I want a better walk. Even on the ground, that good walk is what's going to help him build fitness. There. So I didn't have to wiggle my whip as much that time. Direction. Look at that. So it's probably part of his cart horse training. You know, you don't have your legs around him, so you can't like squeeze or kick with your legs to get the horse to go. So you have to rely on sound or whips. So for him, equating my pointing with moving his feet, he's a little bit slow to pick that up. But that doesn't surprise me, because if they're driving, they have blinders on, they can't see your body anyway. They're communicating based off the whip, the reins, and the sound. But I noticed he is really quick to respond when I kiss. Let's try again. Good. Very good boy, Loki. That's 3 in a row. And look, he's licking and chewing while walking. I knew you could do it, buddy. So the next step, I'm going to keep this up. As long as he can keep doing this, so he's realized that turning towards me is a lot easier than getting chased by the whip. So that is skill number 1 down. I don't think it's perfect. I think he's probably going to be like a C student, but it'll get better the more he practices. So he turns towards me whenever I back up and ask him to change directions. Up. There's a lick and a chew right after that. So there's that C student. Sometimes they try and test the rules. I'm like, I think I get this, but are you sure? The fact that he licked and chewed right after is a sign that he was just testing that behavior. Good. So did you see how he kind of acted out right there? So that's an interesting thing that I learned in dog training, and it's called an extinction burst. It's a behavior thing. And basically what it says is as an animal begins to master a behavior, right before they get to the point where they have truly figured it out, they're also going to try pretty much everything that could also be an answer to that behavior. So for a horse, that would be getting out of behavior. I can buck and throw myself around, and maybe that'll get me out of the behavior. He might not have done that at all in his training up to this point, but right at the very end, as they're getting ready to master it, just like that, that is often when they're gonna throw in their biggest effort to avoid it. And that is the extinction burst. It is the burst of effort before the previous behavior, the poor behavior, goes extinct for good. When it comes to horse training, that often does look like a horse throwing its feet in the air and bucking. And it's really important not to suddenly change what you're working on and be like, oh, I need to treat this bucking and yeehaw your horse during an extinction burst. Because if you just push through the behavior, you kind of ignore it. You don't always ignore bucking, but in this case, if you ignore it and just continue on with what you're working on, so don't change and work on bucking, stay working on turning towards me on the circle, then at the end of that, the animal is going to grasp that concept a lot better. So there's a good lick and chew. Yes. And I'm gonna actually let him stop and wait this time. You probably just have his tail in the camera, but he's licking and chewing a lot right now. And he actually took a step towards me as I backed up this time. So that's good. So that's behavior one down. We've done it. We've gotten him to turn towards me on the lunge. Free lunging right now, but that'll be on the lunge line later in the arena. By paying attention to my body and not turn his butt towards me. So I'm gonna let him lick and chew for a minute while I talk about the next thing I'm gonna look for. So a good stop for me when I'm backing my feet up, I want them to turn to face me. When they're turned to face me, I want them to be prepared to go off in the other direction, but also prepared to stand totally still. That way they're thinking about me in that moment. Later on, I can teach them to stop and whoa on the line without turning towards me, but I don't want to do that just yet. And some trainers will do this opposite. Some trainers want them to whoa on the line and wait until they turn around. If you think about it, I'm not really doing anything too different. The fact that my feet are backing up is drawing him towards me. So the more I back them up, he should be moving his feet until my feet stop. My feet stop means his feet stop. So if I step in front of him when he's lunging and just stand, that would kind of be his cue to stop on the line. But we'll get to that differentiation later. For now, I kind of just keep my feet moving either forward or backwards. I'm not really doing much side to side yet. Just like I don't want his body to move much side to side yet. But that is the next thing we'll work on. You're so good. You're a good boy. He's like, this isn't so bad. It's not that hot out yet. The sun's nasty, but it's not that hot out yet. It's probably like maybe 80, 82 degrees out here, but man, the sun beating down, that's annoying. Need like a big sun hat when I come out here and work with these horses. Or a covered arena, that's the dream. There's a lick and chew. That's a good one. Yeah. Good boy, Loki. practice a few more times. So now that he's turning towards me, he kind of has some hesitation. He'll come to a standstill, I keep moving, and then he turns towards me and goes the other direction. I want to make that fluid where he's going, and then just as I step forward, his feet mirror mine, and so he turns around and goes a different direction. Good boy. So the more we can be connected like that, the better. All right, here I go. Point. Very good, Loki. Yes, you're a good boy. Yeah. So when I say the horses have tension in their body, I don't mean just mental tension. They get physical tension too, which is why the physical release of licking and chewing is so important. They have a ton of sinus cavities all throughout their head. And another funny thing you'll see is as they release that mental tension and that physical tension, those sinus cavities get released and their nose will start to run, and then they'll have to blow their nose like you heard. It's that sound. So that is actually a good sign during training. If you hear the horses doing that, it means they've released some physical tension. They've got a little bit of a runny nose, and they're releasing it. Dude, those are weeds. Those cannot taste good. You're gonna spit them out in a second, I promise. Cool. All right, Loki. Don't do it. So he came in from a trot. Good. So a lot of times, just like you have to change the side you're working on, so you have to work your left horse and then you have to work the right horse. You also have to work the walking horse, the trotting horse, and the loping horse, or the cantering horse. So when I ask him to trot, the behavior might go downhill again. And I have to treat it just like I was training it before. So I was thinking I might turn him around there, but since he actually came from a trot and turned the front of his body towards me before coming to a stop, so we didn't have that halt before he turned towards me, I'm actually going to reward this, because that was kind of a complex thing for him to do. Be at a speed and then choose to turn towards me. That's great. And if you think about it, every step he turns towards me is one step closer to stopping square on and facing me. And that's where we want to get next. Loki boy, did you just go off without me having to kiss to you? That was really good. So much progress. So that was a complete turnaround just off the point and me moving my feet. I did not have to kiss. Let's do a trot again. I'm going to stop him about the same spot I did before. half turning to face me. It was a little bit of a slower stop, but you can see him licking and chewing right now. So he's like, obviously I did something right. So that's good. And this process does take different amounts of time with different horses. Typically, horses that have been trained before take longer, but that's not always the case. Especially if the horses who have been trained before want to be good. They're like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. I really think it is. Please, this is the answer. And you just have to be consistent and brave and say, no, not quite. You don't have to be mean. You just have to be consistent. But it also takes a good deal of awareness of what the horse is doing. You're so good. You're a good boy. All right. He still draws towards this side of the arena, so I do not want to stop here again today. So I'm going to send him around one more time, and if I can get a good stop on that side of the round pen, then I'll take it. We'll stop for today. Sound good, bud? All right. That was so good. Oh, did you step towards me? Yeah, he's thinking about it. So I don't really like where he stopped, so I'm actually gonna, ask him to turn around again. Good. And we'll do a whole lap before I stop him in the same spot. I want a little bit of a better walk. He can trot. Yes. Good. He did step towards me there. Yeah. What a good dude. All right. So since this is where we're going to end, I'm going to wait for him to lick and chew once before I go and approach him. There it is. Shifting his weight, kind of stretching his body out. Good boy. Oh, he's yawning. Yes. You have a big yawn, buddy? It's always funny, I think they know when it's over. For me, like they can tell, just my horses learn to read me. Because they usually wait to yawn till the very end. And as far as I think, I haven't changed anything. But he's yawning. Good boy, Loki. And horses often do like to lick and chew more than once. It's up to you to read them and figure out where in those 3 zones they are. Did they lick and chew from the high yellow zone and now they're still in the yellow zone and they need to keep going? Or were they kind of in the low part of the yellow zone and that first lick and chew got them into the green zone and they will keep going, but they're in the green zone now, so you're safe. You have to learn to read that. Good boy, Loki. All right. Are we about done? Am I putting this up? Good boy. Yeah. So he's hesitant. He's like, I don't know if I should follow you. That's okay. That's not really what I'm working on right now. It's just a byproduct. And if I played with it too much, it would break. Can I come with you? Yeah. You're such a good boy. So I'm not gonna, run around the round pen expecting him to follow me. But they do start to do this when you work with them like this. And it is, I think, it's not always gonna happen, so you don't wanna look for it like that's a sign that you're doing something right. But if you do get them following you around like that, it's a sign you're on the right track. All right, buddy. I think we'll just brush you off today and put some fly spray on, and that'll be it.